I don't know what's more important, and this might get me in trouble later with future keynotes. Is it the keynote or the social afterwards? I mean, it's sometimes that social afterwards is much more important and really what it's about than necessarily that keynote up front.
Yeah. Welcome to Austinpreneur, our show about the stories that made Austin, Texas a global hub for startups. The show is produced by Capital Factory and hosted by me, Nick Spiller. As a reminder, by joining Capital Factory, you can plug into the ecosystem where the stories on this show were set. Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Who's over at the Paramount Theater this morning? Saw some keynotes, very informative. We'll dive deeper. Who saw Mica on the stage? Welcome, kicked us off. Thank you for that. Welcome to this recording of the Austinpreneur podcast. If y'all aren't familiar, we're Capital Factory's podcast. We dive into the stories that have made Texas a hub for innovation and technology. You can follow, listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or really anywhere you get your podcast. So we'll dive in. I'm going to introduce our very special guest who's been at Advanced Technology International, known as ATI, for quite some time, built quite a career there. They're the presenting sponsor of Fed Supernova. We're here recording at our cornerstone dual use innovation conference here at Capital Factory in Austin. But Mica is the president and COO of ATI. She's responsible for company-wide leadership, implementing best practices, promoting the company's vision and their mission. Previously, she's had a few roles, but her last one was a senior vice president of contracts, so she helped negotiate most, if not all, of ATI's contracts, so we could get into that. But the focus is around OTA, consortias, collaborations, and how startups can tap into those organizations, those communities to grow your business. And Mica has been a key contributor to the formation and execution of dozens of those over her career. So please join me in welcoming Mica to the Austinpreneur podcast.
Good here. Really excited to be here.
Welcoming you back.
Yeah, excited.
Another year. So, for those who are not familiar with OTAs, otherwise other transaction authorities, agreements, and the collaborations you manage around them, please give us a quick introduction and how they work, why they're important.
Sure. So other transaction authority, you'll hear it as 4021, 4022. That is written into the National Defense Authorization Act. Goes way back when, has a history, goes all the way back to, getting to the moon. How can we, as the U.S., harness innovation, harness commercial industry, and get there faster, better than the Soviets at the time? And so really pioneered by NASA and DARPA, and then transitioning later into DOD. Eventually it got codified as a permanent authority that DOD has. And so what does that mean? There is a big focus on non-traditionals. What are non-traditionals? Non-traditionals are companies that are not subject to the same cost accounting standards, big DOD word, I'll talk about in a minute, that the large businesses are. So there are non-traditionals, and I think you might have heard, if you heard some of the keynotes that kind of make reference, that do business with federal government, have federal contracts. They still meet that definition because they don't have to do certain cost accounting standards. Education institutions don't have to do certain cost accounting standards. But it really is focused on those innovative, smaller companies who've maybe done an SBIR, maybe not, or venture-backed. It gives them the ability to work outside of the federal acquisition regulations. And so what's interesting about another transaction agreement is that, unlike traditional government contracting, where you have a giant book of clauses and words and terms and conditions, it can legitimately start with a blank piece of paper. I will tell you, and if you've had an experience, you don't typically start with a big piece of paper. Like, we all would love it too. Probably like many of your deals as entrepreneurs, don't start really with a blank piece of paper necessarily. There's terms, conditions, and lessons learned that have been gone through the years that protect both parties. But that is the essence of what it can be. It can start very early on, early stage with research and development, fundamental, moving all the way to prototyping, and in the last several years into production without having to compete. So there was always an ability to kind of sole source something into production or go out and now compete something into production. The government is able to actually take a successful prototype and move directly into a production other transaction agreement or a FAR-based procurement, depending on what those needs are. And so it is a very flexible way to have, to not only make the awards, but make the context. So a lot of what happens with the federal acquisition regulations is that a solicitation goes out and there's a Q&A period where you get to write a very formal question that goes somewhere, see some heads nodding, and then eventually, probably a week before the whole thing was due, you get the responses that are maybe longer than the whole RFP to begin with, that you have to weed through and figure out, but probably only half answered your question. And let's be real, you were probably cute in how you asked the question. And so you get maybe a response, right? What's great about these OTAs, and specifically consortia or collaboration-based OTAs, is the communication. And so we host events in our collaborations, and they're more than just your average industry day with, again, a lot of times you're getting a note card or write something down, or maybe you get the actual iPad where someone's asking real questions, but they're still being reviewed by legal before they go out. These are questions that you can ask about what the requirement is. We also do one-on-one sessions. So then maybe you don't want to ask the question in a big forum. Maybe you want to ask it one-on-one with a government sponsor. We create that environment to allow that to happen. And if there's information that everyone should know about it, then those get posted as an FAQ in a timely fashion to inform your bid decision to be able to do that. So there's a lot, we can get into it more as we talk about specifics, but it is a way for the government to more easily access innovators. And as a consortium manager who creates these collaborations around specific technology areas, our job is really to be a help to both parties. So how can we, and I say this to some of our DoD, how can we speak DoDese back to entrepreneurs and small business? Like when the government says data rights, this is what this means. When the government's talking about cyber, this is what this means. When they want to look at your accounting, this is what this is, and this is how you should answer this, and this is what you should provide. This is what you should be telling them. And then also, we have found, although I think it has gotten better in the last couple of years, of kind of speaking industries back to the government of, that's not really what you should be asking for just because you feel like you're entitled to unlimited rights. Like, are you really going to go commercialize this? You're not. What do you actually need? How can you better define the requirement? And so we play on both those sides, supporting both as a nonprofit. That's kind of our general mission to go forth and do.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So you have these OTAs, which are contracting vehicles with a non-traditional focus, helping companies a lot like we have here at Fed Supernova that are new, fresh, innovative, tap into the Department of Defense. I mean, what is a good situation, or what type of situations does the government use OTAs? Like, what are the where do they really come in, right, rubber hit the road?
So typically where you're going to see them in is where they have a portfolio of problems they're trying to solve. So if it's a single, I'm going to build a ship, I'm going to build a rocket, you don't need a consortium necessarily to do that. You might still use an OTA, and so all OTAs don't have to go through consortia as your procurement, but maybe you don't need to do that. So that's why if you look at things like DARPA, perhaps, they're very specifically focused on, they have a PI who's trying to solve this problem. That's what they go forth and do. So they're not going to necessarily get together a collaboration. Where you have in these different government labs, whether it's within the Army, the Navy has done a lot of theirs around their Naval Surface Warfare Centers. So that's kind of their R&D arm that they use in the warfare centers who work with the PEOs. Program executive offices to support the Navy. They have all specific missions that they are focused on. And so, for example, in the Navy, In Dahlgren, that's surface technology. And so they're looking at energetics, things that are on board, as opposed to the undersea over Newport, where they're going to look at submarines and UASs. So they're different technology focused. Army has things around munitions. In Huntsville, they have missiles and aviation, their AMTC consortium that they use. And that's even actually spread outside of DoD into HHS. And so DoD had a medical consortia, one that we manage back during COVID times, and they actually used that consortium to do some of the vaccine and therapeutic work, because as we all know, DoD got involved in that. Flash forward several years, HHS puts together a collaboration around those same things of vaccines and therapeutics to support pandemics, general health, and also looking at supply chain, because as we also knew with all that, supply chain became a big thing, and so understanding supply chain management in crisis. And so what I would say is that there is typically a consortia collaboration that you may fall into. It may or may not be one that ATI manages. We try on our website for you to be able to kind of type in your focus area to see if there's something that would where you would fall. I'd also offer that our team's always available to help place where you think that might be, because it's an opportunity not only to meet with the government who has funding requirements, but also perhaps people in your supply chain, people in your space, thought leaders. It's a place for a community to gather around.
And what are some of the best practices you've seen when government teams set up, execute these OTA consortia?
Yeah. So the best ways that we have seen that worked is when, and this will be not shocking to anybody, when everyone works together and you have a team and everyone's rolled up their sleeves with a like mission, and where you have attorneys and contracting officers and program managers all with the same focus in mind, and everyone getting to a yes. That doesn't mean that there's always an easy button, and that doesn't always mean that it's definitely not easy. But I think that's really the secret sauce, is people aligned. And so how do you get aligned? You have to understand what the mission's up front, what the goals are. It's, everyone would like everything to be faster. That's not always going to be the case. And so being transparent, I think that's the other aspect. When we talk with, I always tell the government, they always want to know, well, how fast can we go? How fast can we go? And we always tell them, we'll go as fast as you can go, because industry will respond. You give them 2 days to do something, they're not going to like it, but they're going to respond in 2 days. But you've got to keep up your end. So you cannot ask someone to respond in 2 days and then you take 9 months to go do X, Y, or Z. You can't ask someone for 2 days, promise them you'll have a response in 4 weeks, and it takes 12 weeks. That's like that. And if it's going to take 12 weeks, you need to be transparent that, hey, this is what happened, this is when it's coming. And when things don't go well, you've got to go back and figure out what that root cause is and how can you do it better. And so I think empowering people to what they do best is the other part. So you use your consortium manager to do the kind of non-sexy work to kind of get the work done. Make sure that your technology providers, that's what they're focused on. If they don't need, 5,000 safety tests, they need 4,000, then okay, what do they really actually need so they can concentrate on what they can deliver? If speed is most important to you, then incentivize them for speed. If, lethality, accuracy, whatever the more you're transparent, the more everyone's supposed to focus on the right thing, I think the better result. And ultimately, the better result typically would mean a faster result of getting there.
Yeah, so it seems a lot of it is just helping everyone be a good teammate as you're bringing together a pretty large group of stakeholders
Absolutely.
to tackle a really big problem with the biggest customer in the world, the U.S. government and other governments. On the other hand, what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen in these consortia?
I think it is a little bit is over-promising and under-delivering. So part of that is not using these collaborations as fishing expeditions. It's fine to do market analysis and ask industry what's available, but then be transparent about that. There's no funding here this year, or this is what I need this specific TRL level, maturity level in order to be transparent in that. Give feedback. And give feedback if you say you're going to give feedback. If you're going to be quick and you're going to be like, it's just a yellow red, like, or I'm sorry, a green red, you're out, you're moving forward. I think that's fine. But if you are saying you're going to give comments, you're going to provide feedback, then you need to be able to actually do that. It needs to be meaningful feedback, so that people can get better. One of the speakers said that today, like, call me up. I'll tell you straight up if it's good or bad, or if we're going to do that or not. I mean, I think that we all want that and we want to understand that. And sometimes I think that the government allows regulation and leads to get out in front of that. And I think that can deter people entering in.
Then how about on the industry side of things? How should they look at consortia and getting value out of these groups?
Yeah, so I would say that we have probably, 6,500 plus members in our consortia. This last year, we probably have about 1,500, 1,800 active awards. So you can do the math. Everyone doesn't get an award, right? Everyone's not going to be a lead in a project. There's plenty that are going to be subcontractors, to one of those not either traditional or non-traditional primes. As I may have mentioned, like of ours, 66% are all led by non-traditionals. But there are other mechanisms, as I mentioned, when we have these general membership meetings, which are typically free as part of somebody's membership. You get to hear, keynote speakers, you get to hear government, you also get to hear industry. So I mentioned government one-on-ones that we do. We also do B2B. So we'll put the large OEMs in a room and, non-traditionals can sign up to go meet with them and kind of do a round robin across those two. And I think that's been really beneficial. And we talked about it, the challenge to go make connections and go do that. That's what those events are about. I don't know what's more important, and this might get me in trouble later with future keynotes. Is it the keynote or the social afterwards? I mean, it's sometimes that social afterwards is much more important and really what it's about than necessarily that keynote up front.
Yeah. So yeah, we were, like I mentioned, we were here a year ago at Fed Supernova speaking. It seems like so much has changed in the last year. It's just on a lot of different angles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from your perspective at ATI, how have things been going? Any particular updates that you want to share with the community?
So if you are in DoD or general government contracting or in that space, it's been a year. I mean, we get asked, with administration changes, does that affect your business? Our board or whoever will ask that, and we're like, no, we are generally, agnostic to that because it's R&D, and that's really, that's at the heart of who we are as America is investing in our entrepreneurs. So that's really not that. This administration with DOGE and others has been different, and so there are different people in different spots or no people in spots. But I think there's been a general kind of understanding and appreciation. I think that there's been a greater, what I have seen from the DoD and HHS and DOE is the encouragement of innovation and the wanting to do things faster, better, more engaged with industry. I've been to a series of meetings in the last, 6-8 months, and from leadership there, both on a contracting side and a program management side, is, hey, how can industry do more? How can you ATI support me more so that I can concentrate on this and we can get more awards done and we can get, so it's been a bigger call of action of, hey, how can we cut red tape? If you're following the NDAA and you've got the Forge Act and the Speed Act, so even Congress is really looking at acquisition reform and how we can do things better, faster. I said in my opening remarks, we did OTAs before OTAs were cool. And now they're kind of everywhere. How do we make sure now that things are everywhere, they still stay true to themselves, so that we don't have to have an other transaction agreement or other transaction authority? So how do we avoid that? And I've seen a lot of like positivity in the last year and going in that direction by everybody. So industry championing that, Congress championing that, the department championing that. And so I think those are all very positive things.
Excellent. And I have one more question, then I'll turn it over to the audience. And any of you have relevant questions, we'd love to hear. And Aaron will come around and get those for the podcast as well. But what are some common misconceptions about consortia, and what would you say to set the record straight?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of them is that it's just a farce to get to the bigs. Like I said, that 66% of our awards, and if you look at so some people would say, oh, well, that's the numbers, that's not the dollars. No, the dollars follow that, are led by non-traditionals. 99% of those have significant non-traditional participation. Typically, that's not just one non-traditional, but multiple non-traditionals. And so it is a way to go and support that community. Even, if I go back to, the Future Vertical Lift Initiative, the FLARA initiative, which that's, Bell Helicopter. I mean, you're having OEMs go and do that. What is important in those initiatives is that it also is a place for modular open system architecture, which means that is breaking down barriers and letting people into the supply chain. It's a way for easy access to continuously infuse technology into a platform. And so I think that is a way, and part of that was done through a consortia to be able to go and support that. The other thing is that sometimes there's this notion that it's a pay to play, that, hey, I've got to join this thing to go do that. That infers that there's no benefit of becoming a member. I will tell you that the dues for these are typically somewhere between $250 to maybe $1,000 if you're a larger company annually. Sometimes that's a one-time thing. I would say there's plenty of ours that have no dues, because it's really kind of how it was set up and what the government demands are. Those are used to support things like events, like those socials that I said we're good. So there's a benefit to that. Some of DoD does restrict access to what their requirement is. They want to make sure that they've got players who are in that technology space. Sometimes there's security requirements associated with those. And so I would say it's not a pay to play. It's a come join and get an incredible membership for a relatively low dollar to be able to participate and do that. For our activities, from an ATI perspective, the government is what's funding those activities that we're doing and supporting. Really, the dollars that a member pays is a direct benefit back to the member, whether they get an award or not.
Yeah. And it seems, listening to Doug Beck, the director of DIU this morning, talk and just his focus on building portfolios of record, and just really the whole DoD seeming to really be leaning into non-traditional smaller companies that, more and more would, that 66% might go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would expect. So who has a question for Mica?
So what's the typical product maturity as far as like prototype to complete? What phases does OTA normally target?
Good question.
Yeah, so normally it depends. So you can do the lower TRL level, it's allowed. So you can actually do fundamental research on a 4021. But the more mature, so it's probably a 7-8 range, but again, that depends. It depends on the customer and what they're focused on. And we see plenty of things that are multi-phased. And so they're going to progress through that. And that's also kind of the beauty when I say it's a portfolio of looking at early stage work during one annual cycle, going out the next cycle for a next phase, and then moving it as it goes along.
Hey, I'm Jeff Orr from Defense Industry Advisors, or ATI members. A question for you on how you guys use the basket. So we currently have 3 white papers in the basket for a little over a year now. Is that a function of funding, like to your point earlier about the competence level of the funding, or is that market research, or what? And second to that, can we shop that around since it's been competed now and it's in the basket? to a government customer as a sole source-ish type of deal?
So yes, yes, and yes. So it could be part funding. And so it could be that it just wasn't necessarily the right fit. So the government can put things in the basket. They're like, hey, this is maybe my number 2 choice. It could be, hey, it's my number 1 choice, but I don't have funding yet. It may have been my number 1 choice, but my priorities have shifted, and my budget didn't go through, priority shifted. So it's a variety of really customer dependent on what that is and time dependent. You 100% can shop it around. One thing so if you have another person, as you're doing your business development that says, hey, that's exactly what I need, you can say, I've got something in the basket, which means it's been through part of a competitive process, and we can get to award faster. So that is one of the benefits of the basket. I'll also do a little plug for SBIRs. Phase 3 SBIRs is funding that you get outside of the SBIR program. We do lots of SBIR phase 3s. We can do them. Some actually do them as a single source through. A lot of them really, or they just get thrown as a topic area as part of those either annual, semi-annual cycles that go through. So it is a way to get SBI, if you have as you're doing your business development and you're going to move to an SBIR phase 3, it is a way to go ahead and do that. Because sometimes who you're talking to doesn't necessarily have a contracting arm that can support you.
I think I'm picking up on it. What exactly is the basket?
Oh, sorry. So the basket is the government can select an award and they can say, yep, award it. Nope, no good, reject it. Or, hey, it's got technical merit. I'm just not ready to fund it right now for those reasons that I just said. And it goes into a basket. The basket life varies. Can be 12 months for some I think go as long as like 36 months, where someone can come in and pull it out of the basket. They go through the contracting office and the program office that owns that OTA, and they can make the award.
Awesome. Sweet. For us amateurs. I think most people in the room might know, but a lot of us maybe tuning in are still a little new to the DODEs.
Yes, DODEs, and that's a non-FAR thing that you can do. So that's good.
Excellent. All right, we have another question in the back.
Yeah, I'm Eric. I'm with Scout. We help a lot of startups with dual use and technologies to land fibers and gun contracts. And I would love to understand the path for a startup from OT discovery to an award. Like, what are the stages they go through? Just in a nutshell, like joining a consortia.
Sure.
And so on.
Yeah, so you can join a consortia. As I said, most consortia that we manage have a government sponsor. They typically are going to release requirements that they intend to fund that year. Some do it annually, some do it some sort of, quarterly or twice a year. Some do it completely ad hoc. So basically, as someone comes to them and says, I have a requirement of money, then a solicitation gets set. It really is very customer dependent. There are pros and cons on which way that works. I typically tell customers if you can group them, that's better, just because it's very hard for everyone to navigate when things are going to drop. And if you're talking about small businesses, if you've got your CEO and your CTO and that's what you got, and someone's on vacation that day, and they miss this tight turn, that can be hard. So if we can group them, we try to get people to group them. That doesn't always work. But the solicitation comes out. Typically, as I mentioned, that there would be some sort of industry engagement, whether that's a virtual or a bigger collaboration event, where you're able to hear from the requirement owner, ask questions, have those one-on-ones with the government, and having teaming opportunities potentially. It gets solicited, variety of different ways things get solicited, what you have to turn in response to that solicitation. Some things are, a full cost and technical proposal. Some are, a 5-page white paper. It really, again, is customer dependent. And then if you get selected for awards, you go through that process. For things that go through the ATI collaborations, and I would say collaboration consortia in general, the government is still directing everything. So the government is still you would have that same interaction with your government customers you would if you had a direct contract with them. The consortia manager, ATI, is really there to help facilitate. So we'll do things to support the program manager, support the contracting office, but the government still is doing all those inherently governmental functions. and you're still having, ATI is not an intermediary for you to communicate with when you talk to the government customer. That's a direct relationship that you have. So it's a way to streamline a typical acquisition process.
Excellent.
Hi, Derek Muir with Adam.io. I had a question. You hit on it around teaming agreements or TAs. Do you guys work through that as the consortia, as contract vehicles come out, or what does that look like from your standpoint?
Yeah. So when you join the consortia, it is a maybe one-page document that basically says, here are the things that you do as a consortium member, and here's the things that we do as a consortium manager. And that's really it. It's very, it is very light because we are not taking your IP. We're not part of that. We are facilitating. And so we're not signing a teaming agreement. We will sign the OTA with you, and it'll have, again, what the government's doing, what the member is doing, the provider doing, what is ATI doing from that perspective. When we facilitate teaming arrangements, those are still B2B, so that's between you and her. We're not going to get in the middle of that. We're going to provide the environment to go do that and help you try to match capabilities.
Shane Jennings with the Forge Institute. I'm going to tack on to that question. What's the typical good size, if you were to say it, that a consortium is comprised of? Is it 2 or 3 companies or hundreds? You mentioned you have thousands of companies.
Oh, yes.
What does that sort of look like?
Oh, so there are some that are probably 300-400, and there's some that are like 1,200. It really depends on the scope of what's there. I don't think the success of a consortia is the number, because really the number is driven by the technology space. We have customers who throw it's something as broad as sustainment, like that's a really, that's really big. And so you might have a ton of entrants that are in something like that. And so it's about requirement for our perspective. Like when we talk about success metrics to the government, like what makes this a successful, did you have the right people at the table? Did you get potential solutions from enough? Did you hear about stuff you didn't know? Did you get things from the same three companies that you normally do, or did you get them from 5 and the decision got harder and you learned about the state of the art? That's really what we're looking at it. So it's not necessarily a numbers game.
And just a quick question. So when award is made, there's the 3 parties, the government, ATI, and the industry partner. Is the award to ATI and the industry partner is a sub, or is it direct to that industry partner?
So this is where it is special, because an OTA is what an OTA is. And so the privity of contract and all what you would normally say is different. And so the OTA actually spells it out very specifically what the roles and responsibilities are. So typically the government is going to make an award to ATI. ATI is going to make an award to the contractor, but they're not considered they're still considered a prime with responsibilities. So ATI is not responsible for your technical achievement. It's going to say that you're responsible. ATI is responsible for ensuring that you end up delivering and the government signs off on it and we make the payment. So we're going to be the one that pays you, that help facilitate that. So you don't have to deal with other things like white air workflow and DFAS, trying to help out. But that's how it works. So it's all spelled out differently than what you would see in a normal kind of prime sub relationship.
Thanks. Ron Sidikowski, Director of Federal Solutions at Startup. Going back to the success metrics that you mentioned a little bit ago. So looking across, I don't know, maybe 3 dozen consortia, is there any good review mechanism kind of at the stage of figuring out, okay, other than just like by topic, right? How to identify the success of that consortia, how active that community is, kind of understanding the characteristics of it, right? Instead of just saying, hey, we kind of fit in this area, join this one.
Yeah, so most of our consortium, I only say most because some have restrictions on what they will allow publicly released. We also list all the awards that are made. And so that's part of, so you get to see, what they're funding and who it went to. So I think that gives some of the vibrance from a technology perspective of what's important, what's going on. So that's another way that's there. I'll just offer from an ATI perspective, trying to find different ways to make that more accessible. the consortia, they post their success stories of different things that are there. You know, we saw Crossbow. Crossbow is a member of, you know, gets funding through one of our consortia for some of their project development. I mean, so those stories are out there to kind of see where you fit and what makes sense. So ATI has one consortia, you guys work across? No, we work across. We have a 25 to 30 across. Yep. So multiples. You don't join ATI, you join whatever the specific technology-focused consortia we have.
Well, Mica, thank you. And thanks ATI
Thank you.
for your support of the podcast, Capital Factory, Fed Supernova, and hope to see you again next year.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Awesompreneur. Don't forget to check out capitalfactory.com to learn more about us and join our community. If you have thoughts about the show or ideas on how we can work together, reach out to me directly via email, nickspiller@capitalfactory.com. Shout out to the Capital Factory Dream Team for making this podcast possible, and special thanks to Aaron Handworker, who masterfully recorded and edited the show. Come back next week for a whole new episode.